Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'd like you all to give a warm welcome to our main speaker, Alan.
I'm Alan, alcoholic. And I'm your substitute speaker. I found out about this commitment about 2 minutes after the meeting started. Now, had I known I was going to speak, I would have worn a necktie, because I use the same joke that Don does, about the tie, and then he pulls it off. No, just kidding. I guess a lot of you guys haven't heard Don speak, so next week. Anyway, I'd like to thank Nancy and Diane for allowing me the privilege of coming up here and sharing my experience, strength, and hope. Alcoholics Anonymous has completely changed my life. To get the statistics out of the way, I've been sober 19 years and about 4 months. And this is through no fault of my own. And I say I'm sober today because of the grace of God. By the grace of God, I'm sober today and standing before you. And after you hear a bit of my story, you'll understand why I attribute my sobriety to God. I grew up in New England and just came off vacation. Was back there for 10 days a couple of weeks ago, and started down in Virginia and rented a car and drove all the way up into Maine and spent a couple of days with my family, I should say my parents, and came back home. And I remembered growing up and thinking, what a wretched place this place is, how small it is and small. When I was 2 years old, I found out that Rye, New Hampshire wasn't the center of the universe. And I was very disappointed. And there were other places. When the television would come on and these people would come across and talk, I thought they were talking to me, specifically. I thought they could I'd sort of talk back to them sometimes. Had this communication, and I was very disappointed, after about 2. And about the same time, in my family, my family broke apart. My mother left the family. My mother is an alcoholic, and last I heard is still alive and practicing very proficiently her alcoholism. And for years I felt like, I'm so screwed up because my mother left me. My mom left me. And she left me because it's my fault. One of the things that we learn around here, at the root of her illness is that we're selfish and self-centered. This is now everything I'm going to tell you, I've learned since I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I've learned out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the program of recovery. I didn't pay any attention to this thing for a long time when I got around here, but I do now. And I blame my mother for everything. Retarded my emotional development. So I sort of felt like I stopped growing emotionally when I was about 2. And the evidence of that is today, in my life today, every once in a while, my two-year-old comes out to bat for me. It's like, when I want my way, my 2-year-old is out there saying, hey, give me mine. I want mine right now. I want you to do it for me. I want you to take care of me. I want you to be here for me. That's what my 2-year-old does. And it's sometimes that's okay because sometimes people do it. That's great. But unfortunately, sometimes I need my adult to be present and not my 2-year-old. And anyway, that creates a lot of confusion as you'll see in my story, here in my story. Anyway, Mom left because I thought it was my fault and that basically I'm unlovable. And of course, we all know that's a lie. Nowadays we do. But she took off, and I spent about 7 years with my grandparents. And during this period of my life, this was really, I can't remember, I think it was Vicki who was saying that it was the only time she felt safe, that safe feeling. I remember I was about 2 or 3 years old. My grandmother would kick my grandfather out of bed, and she'd bring me into bed because I guess I was fussing or crying or something. And I remember climbing into the bed with her, and the bed would kind of sag down in the middle, and I'd roll up next to this big warm body, and I'd throw my leg over her waist. And I felt so safe and taken care of. And I didn't feel that safety, for years. Well into my sobriety. And that's what I ached for, yearned for, drank for all of my life. I ended up, neither of my grandparents drank because my great-grandfather was an alcoholic, and my grandfather had to assume the responsibilities of taking care of a large family. And however, they did keep around the house a little whiskey for medicinal purposes. Now, this was doled out a teaspoonful at a time, when you had pneumonia. And I had my first taste of this stuff, which I knew had to be extremely good, because this little bottle of whiskey was up in the top shelf in this walk-in pantry. And I knew that my grandmother would always place things well out of my reach if they were especially good. So I learned how to scale up. I probably should have gotten into mountain climbing or something, but I learned how to scale up the face of this pantry and try this, a nip at a time, this whiskey. Now, at 6 years old, it really didn't do a whole lot for me, but just because it was taboo, I built a connection with it so that, by the time I got around to being a teenager, I really, I was already in love with it. It was just a great love affair. Anyway, I left my grandparents when I was about 8. My dad had remarried and decided that, the new stepmother decided that she needed the family together. I didn't want to leave my grandparents, so nobody discussed this with me. It was just, they came in one night and they said, "You're coming home. You're coming home with me." And I really didn't want to go. And it just, something to me fell, something again. Again, I lost my family again. And I started looking at my new family. I didn't like them as well as my grandparents, and I just started feeling more and more different. I wasn't getting along. When I lived with my grandparents, we lived at the beach, and at the beach in the wintertime, nobody lived down there except us. So I didn't have a whole bunch of classmates or friends. I was really kind of a loner, and I was very comfortable being alone. And for years when I was in my sobriety, although I didn't act alone, I would come to meetings because I knew I had to come to these meetings because everything else in my life hadn't worked, and this I realized was my only hope. But I would come to meetings, room full of people. I'd sit up in the back, or sometimes I'd sit up to the side, but I would be alone. I wouldn't stick my hand out. I wouldn't extend myself. I wouldn't face any of my fear. I'd sit over there and try to look cool, try to look composed, and try to look like I fit in. But I didn't. I was really alone. And I just reinforced that aloneness, throughout my life. Anyway, I was having these, I looked at my new family. My stepmother would make me clothes, and all my friends had nice clothes. I had these clothes that she made, and I knew she made them, and they looked terrible on me. They were patterns that were probably 20 years old. I'd go to school, I felt like a clown. And if you're a kid, God, it's like the worst thing, So, and then, of course, because I realized all these things about myself, I was incredibly shy, but yet also incredibly needy. It's like I needed you guys, but I was afraid of you. I wanted you to come in, and I wanted you to take care of me, but I wanted to be loved and hugged and all of that stuff, and I couldn't ask for it. It's just, I just figured you knew that, and You know, so what I ended up doing, like when I was in high school, I ended up getting in these relationships with girls that could mind read. And when they couldn't mind read well enough, then, you know, we're on to the next one. It was funny the other day. It's like I was talking to my sponsor, I think Tuesday, and he says, he said, "Yeah, you and I, we seem to develop our relationships in clusters. You know, we you know, have a wife and a girlfriend or two, and then there's always two or three, you know, kind of lined up out there. You know, you're being nice to them for a year or 2 years. You know, we're real patient around here in AA. And God, you learn patience. Yeah, cluster relationships. Yeah, I kind of like that. But I did that very same thing for years. You know, I remember by the time I got out of high school, I was drinking every weekend, and sometimes during the week, but not regularly. But I was drinking every weekend, and I remember in my high school yearbook, I had a couple of people, one girl who's now a fellow alcoholic, but now deceased, wrote in there, from one drinking partner to another. I said, well, I'm not going to be able to show my parents this yearbook. And another one said, whenever I hear the word party, I'm going to think of you. And I went, wow, I'm a star. You know, I didn't care about the National Honor Society or any of this stuff, you know. I was like a drinking hero. And as soon as, you know, as soon as I would take that drink, you know, all of that stuff about the bad clothes and being scared and being needy, all of that stuff would just totally disappear. All of that pain and all that fear, that anxiety, that big knot of crap in my gut would just disappear. And I really was the life of the party. I really was comfortable. You know, alcohol really was working in my life. And it worked. It worked for a few years. I went into the Marine Corps because it was, you know, going to the Marines for my family was like easy. You know, Paris Island Boot Camp was a piece of cake compared to where I came from. You know, it was great. I loved it. And but kind of being a typical alcoholic, and in this sense, like you go out and my kind of disease is I'll go out and I'll tackle something. I'll pick a task. And either I conquer the task quickly, and the other end of the task, the other half of the task is hanging in there and being persistent and being constant and showing up every day. You know, that's the kind of thing I'm not interested in. You know, it's like I'm an idea man. You know, I want to get up here when everything's got a lot of energy and I want to be part of that. But when it comes to suiting up and showing up and being a worker among workers, that's not my forte. You know. So I had a lot of trouble with this. So whatever it is I started in, be at college, it took me about 5 years to get 2 years of college. You know, I mean, like this. And the same thing in the Marine Corps. I had this, you know, meteoric rise up to, you know, some rank after about 2 years. And then I got there, and I realized that they had expectations of me, you know, to act like an adult and act like a person who's responsible and whatnot. And I wasn't. You know, emotionally, I was about 2 years old. That's where I was emotionally. You know, I would have temper tantrums, and you know, and my behavior was very passive. You know, if I couldn't tell you to go, you know, jump in a lake, I'd communicate non-verbally, and I don't mean, you know, throwing the finger out or anything. I just stand there and back off. You know, I'm out of the relationship, whatever it may be, a business relationship, you know, a sexual relationship, whatever it was. That was my MO. Especially in, you know, it's when it came down to getting sober, that's what got me, because I'd lost all of these relationships that I'd tried to preserve. I didn't have any. I mean, I was getting kicked out of my favorite bar, a place where I did feel safe, a place I felt safe being drunk. I mean, people said you're an alcoholic, and I go, no, I'm not. But I'd feel myself puff up inside with a little pride, and I go, hey, boy, I'm an alcoholic. I'm really something, you know. That's where I was coming from. And I couldn't believe it when the guy at the door said, "You're not welcome in here anymore. You can't come in here." And I wanted to argue with him. What I was doing was blacking out and not really being aware of it, and my behavior was getting a little radical. And so they asked me to leave. And at the time I was married, and my wife would want to know why I wasn't coming home for 2 or 3 days at a stretch. And at first, the story, I had enough stories, kind of a dictionary full of stories, maybe even an anthology of stories that she kind of wanted to believe for a while. And, even those things ran out. So it's like, when in the Marine Corps, the same thing. I did great, and all of a sudden it came time to just do it over and over and over again. But that's like life. That's what we do. We go up, we get up, and we go to our job, and sometimes our job is just doing the same thing over and over again, whether we want to or not. I didn't know anything about responsibility. I didn't know anything about maturity. I didn't know anything about acting like an adult and accepting that kind of thing. I just refused to accept it. So all of a sudden my star in the Marine Corps went crashing into the sea. And when I got out honorably, but they didn't ask me if I was interested in showing up for another 6 years. I didn't even get the pitch to tell them no. I was very disappointed. But I got out, I got married, and that was kind of an interesting story too, because as you know, the way I do my relationships is, I operate from this very passive corner. You've got to be a mind reader. You got to know what's going on with me. You've got to be very sensitive to my needs, very sensitive. And of course, I think I know what's going on with you all the time too. So, make a long story short about this. I was in this, I had rented this is where my star brought me. I was in this little place in Redondo Beach. And it was one of those, it was a room with a kitchenette. And to use the bathroom, you had to go to the middle of the parking lot, and there was this building in the middle of the parking lot, and that's where the bathroom was. And the parking lot was dirt. And when you opened the door to my place, it smelled like natural gas, because there was a major gas leak in there somewhere. And I had a lot of these, I was responsible, went down to the Goodwill, and I bought a lot of pots and pans and kitchens. I got into cooking, but I wasn't much into cleaning dishes. And so you'd walk into my place, you'd open the door, come in, here'd be all these pots and pans around. This is God's honest truth. You'd look at there, and sometimes they might be there for a couple of weeks, look like chia pets growing up out of these pans. Swear to God, it was incredible. Things were huge. Multicolored things. And a few of the pans actually just dried out, nothing would grow in them. And I remember one of my girlfriends was coming over one day, and I thought maybe I better, run some water through the pots and pans or something. And this one that had dried out actually had like rat turds in it. I mean, I didn't know I had rats in my place. It hadn't occurred to me. Of course, I couldn't have cared less. So anyway, one of these young ladies was in my bed, and there's only the one room, with the bed. That was you were on the bed or off the bed. That was it. Kind of cut through the dialogue, But so she's in the bed, and she's telling me about her pregnancy, which happened to be mine. Now this is something that sort of gets the old blood going, When all of a sudden I hear this very familiar roar of this Volkswagen coming in the parking lot, and it sounds like my girlfriend. Like my real girlfriend, And so I went, God, what am I going to do? This is really the worst kind of situation, especially for a scared alcoholic, So I went to the door. I had an idea. I went to the door. I opened the door, and this girlfriend had already told me that she was pregnant. So I thought, this is really a tough situation here. So I opened the door, I brought her in, and I introduced the two of them, and then I left. I thought whatever had to be figured out could be figured out between them. I mean, they didn't need my participation. They knew everything about me, you know? So, this is how sick they were. I mean, did they need Al-Anon or what? I mean, they came and told me, they said, we want you to choose one of us. I went, oh my God, here I was. I looked like Charles Manson. I had long hair and kind of a scraggly beard, you know, that like mice had been gnawing at. I mean, I just didn't have enough facial hair to grow a full beard. So I looked pretty pathetic. What these two, and I didn't have a job. I lived in this horrible place. I didn't know anything about washing pots and pans. I mean, what woman in her right mind would want to be with me? And then they're asking me to pick one of them. Now, both of them had a job. They had cars. I didn't have a car. So anyway, I did pick one of them, and the other one promptly ran out in the middle of Pacific Coast Highway and tried to get run over by a bus. So now you know why I had to drink and use drugs. I just couldn't bear that stuff. So anyway, all this stuff occurred about 7 years before I was able to call it quits. And during that period of time, I'm not going to get into this major drunkalogue on this thing. During that period of time, in that 7 years, I stayed married almost the whole time to that same woman, and we had a baby boy. And at the end of my drinking, this kid was in the first grade, and what I remember, you know, first grade, what's that, 6 years old. I remember this boy going off to school with me being in the prone position on the living room floor because I was too ashamed of myself to make it into the bedroom, you know, to climb into bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. But I remember looking up at this 6-year-old kid, you know, I'm like looking up as he walks by, and he just, like the look that he would give me, you know, why weren't you there to tuck me in last night? Like, I don't know why I wasn't there. I mean, later what I found out is, of course I didn't know why. I'm an alcoholic. We don't know anything, you know, especially when we're drinking and using. So I got to the point where I just used up all of my excuses. You know, the anthology had been read a couple times, and it's like she knew it. She knew it, and my boss knew it. You know, my barfly friends knew it. I got kicked out of my 2 favorite drinking places without, you know, never come back. I mean, I was at wit's end. And I'd remembered something that I'd seen in television, and it was Dick Van Dyke had done some movie. In that movie, he gets up and he says, you know, I'm so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic. And it was at an AA meeting, and that was my contact with AA. And it was either I blow my brains out, you know, had I a gun or a means to do so, which I didn't have, or I try to, for the first time in my life, become responsible. And I don't feel like I had a choice in that. I don't feel like there was any choice. But I did it. I was invited to a noontime meeting in Manhattan Beach. And I went to that meeting, scared to death. I had no idea what to expect. I thought AA was a cult, which it really is. I thought it was like a religious cult. And I was willing to do that. I was willing to do anything. I was willing to go to any length, you know, to rid myself of this crap that was filled up my very being completely. And that willingness, by the way, lasted about 10 days after I sobered up. Now, prior to that, I'd never been able to stay sober for more than 7 days, other than being in Marine Corps boot camp. That was the longest period of sobriety I'd had in about 13 years. But you know, the thing that really amazed me was they said, yeah, we do this thing one day at a time. We don't drink one day at a time. You know, we go to meetings, and we work these things called steps. I'm going, the steps? What are they talking about, the steps? And I was sitting at that old club in Manhattan Beach, and I turned around and I saw these people sitting in these steps that went to the next level. And they said there were 12 steps. I counted the steps, there were 13 steps. Now there really are 13 steps. Well, there are, you know, the kind of program I used to work, there are 13 steps. But I was very confused about these steps and quite resistant about it. And as a matter of fact, it says tonight, you know, unless you're willing to give up your old ideas, absolutely, then you're really not ready to take these steps. And I wasn't ready. It took me about 27 months before I worked through the steps thoroughly for the first time. And there's nothing worse. I heard Clancy talk one time, and he says, actually, I heard him talk, it was on television, and he wasn't on as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was on this thing, they had this deal where they had, it was like a panel, and they had people in recovery programs and their kids or their spouses, like Al-Anons. And they asked Clancy's daughter what it was like when he wasn't drinking. And she was the only one that said this. And she said, whenever he tried to sober up, this is before he got to the program, whenever he tried to sober up, it was awful. We much preferred him drunk. We knew what to expect. He was predictable. And so for 2 years, I was that kind of, that irritable, restless, discontent alcoholic, sober alcoholic. And that was the worst. I had anxiety like I had before I took my first drink. I had that all come back again. And I can see why, in my period of sobriety, I've seen a number of people in this program that kill themselves, that would rather go to that length than to work these simple steps. That's the kind of fear. I had that kind of fear. I thought about suicide for several years in this program. But I didn't have to do it. I've seen a bunch of people since I've sobered up, people that I really cared about, be too afraid to take that chance. And all we do here is hold each other's hand and get a little positive reinforcement in our lives and become responsible. And in becoming responsible, we find out we're really okay. I didn't give Alcoholics Anonymous that chance, really. Even after working the steps the first time, there were character defects that I refused to give up. I was just not ready to do it. And so as a result of this inability to commit to the idea of giving up absolutely, my life in AA, proceeded generally along the guidelines that it always proceeded. That I had affairs, that I was dishonest, that I did all the stuff. I mean, and there may be a few people out here having affairs. I know that I've been around here long enough, I've sponsored enough people to know that that's how we try to fix ourselves. But none of it worked. None of that stuff worked. I ended up starting my own business. I made a lot of money so I could afford a nice home, expensive cars, expensive vacations, everything. But none of that stuff bought me any kind of inner peace. Didn't mean anything. I went through a number of relationships. I mean, obviously, if you're married and you're having affairs and you get caught, you're going to go through a number of relationships if you're not willing to give it up. And I'm not proud of that. But the reason I tell you this is that if there's someone out here who's having a tough time or who identifies with my feelings and my story, you can stay sober through that stuff. There's another side of it, There's another side of it. And I had something happen about 7 years ago that got my attention, made me stand up and take a look at myself. And it really kind of marked a change in my sobriety. It was very, very painful, and it was so painful that I just couldn't go on with my life and ignore that. So ever since then, I've become an active, involved member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've worked these steps. I practice the traditions. I sponsor. I got a guy that I'm taking through the big book. See, this is something that I had really sort of refused to get involved with. I mean, I've read the book, but I never really went through the book and studied the book with someone. And right in the foreword to the first edition, what it tells you is that this is a story of precisely how 100 hopeless drunks have recovered from a seemingly hopeless disease. And I went, man, 100 people precisely recovered. I mean, that sort of got my attention. I mean, what else are they telling me about my disease? And what they're telling me is that the reason that none of this stuff worked, the girlfriends, the money, the trips, I mean, whatever it was, you know, why if everyone in this room just loved me and said that, Alan, we love you, wouldn't be enough. Wouldn't be enough. I've got that alcoholic black hole. And if everybody in the face of the earth said it, it's not that. What it says in the big book is that we're beyond human aid. And this is something I don't want to look at. I don't want to hear anything about God. But that's the fact. And you can believe it from me, because I have not lived my Alcoholics Anonymous program vicariously. I've been a participant observer in all of the crap. In all of the crap, not a single bit of it works. And the only thing that is really, the thing that's brought me recovery is this relationship that I have with my higher power. And my sponsor helped me find that. Several sponsors have helped me find that. You know, that's part of the process. You know, I walk out into the world, I'm stone cold sober, and my natural, since I'm an alcoholic, my natural reaction out there is that I am scared to death. I'm terrified. I need your approval. I don't care if, I mean, you're my boss, you're the guy I'm trying to sell something to, you're the guy I'm trying to get paid from, you're the person I want to like me, you're the person that I like, I want you to like me. I mean, I just live for that approval, you know, and that isn't enough. That's like my 2-year-old, you know. So where I get my approval today is that I do all of these things that basically the program demands of me. Tonight it was to get up here and share my experience, strength, and hope. My sponsor demands of me. He says, you know, you're obligated to call me. This is 19 years and 4 months of sobriety. You're obligated to call me every Tuesday at 10 o'clock, and I don't care if you're in the East Coast or the Florida. You know, I do all of this stuff. You're obligated to meet me at the, you know, by the front door after the Wednesday meeting. The reason I do this stuff is because I don't want to do any of this stuff, because I'm an alcoholic. That's against my nature. But I do it because this is one of the ways that I get out of myself. This is one of the ways that I submit to like a higher authority. It reminds me. So in those times when I'm out in the world and I'm full of fear and I'm scared to death and I'm lost, it's like I've got a list in my book that I carry around with me that has the names of about 70 men that I can call. You know, when I was out there drinking and using, I didn't have a single phone number. I didn't have a single friend. Sometimes, you know, in the big book, it told me where to find my higher power. And that higher power is deep down inside. That's where we look for this higher power. So that wherever I go, this higher power is with me. And sometimes I have trouble connecting. And what helps me connect are my friends. So I get on the phone, I call my friends, and I say, man, I'm feeling alone out here today. I'm having a rough time. And they talk to me. They talk to me, they listen to my crap. And I know that I have a tremendous amount of structure in my life. I have people that I'm obligated to, and you know, I suit up and show up. And you know what? I have a purpose. You know, I didn't know what my purpose was before I came here. And it is so important to have a purpose, no matter what your goal is, what you're doing, you know, if it's for a better job. Why are you working? You know, what's your purpose in working? You know, more people say, I hate my job, or I hate this part of my life. Well, what's your purpose for that part of your life? If you can figure out what the purpose is, it's a whole lot easier. And my purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Because that's what I have found over all these years and all these experiences makes me feel like a whole person. You know, I just came back off 10 days of vacation. I went to one meeting. Normally I go to about 6 meetings a week. That's like my comfort level, either my comfort level or that's the way it is, and I just accept it completely. I love meetings. One meeting in 10 days is not enough for me. Because what happens, that old head starts kicking in, those old ideas, and it's not like I'm going to drink again or I think I'm normal or anything like that. I start thinking I can take charge again. You know, and I start doing it, and I start feeling uncomfortable. And you know, I know that I don't have to live my life that way today. I don't need to go through life feeling uptight and anxious and uncomfortable, because there's a solution. And you guys have taught it to me. I haven't been a very good listener, but I've finally learned it. You know, and all of this stuff about, you know, I've never been consistent. I've never been persistent. You know, I've never been tenacious about anything except my sobriety. I mean, and I don't know why. It doesn't make any difference. I believe that I'm sober because of the grace of God. I am so grateful that I'm standing here tonight, that you're out here tonight, that we're all sober tonight. It's really a gift. And there are a lot of people that need this gift that, you know, a couple of members of my family have died from this disease and the denial of this. It's like the greatest thing. You can do anything at all if you stay sober. I believe that. There's a price, there's work in everything. There's work in sobriety. This is not a sit in your chair, keep the dust off the chair kind of program. This thing, beginning at step one, requires action. And I can say that because I was inactive for so long. But I've never been so happy. I've never felt so good, never felt so grateful as I do right now. And if I give you anything tonight, I take my hope. I believe it'll work for anyone if it works for me. And thanks a lot for listening to me.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.